I was doing a demonstration and somebody said, "You must have been good in geometry in high school." And it was really the first opportunity that I had to recognize that what I was making really had something to do with my life before becoming a maker of objects. The geometry of wood turning is the geometry of the lathe is one aspect of it. The geometry of the material is another aspect of it. So there's this relationship between the way I think, the way I see things, and the organic geometry of the material that I use.
These are some of the oldest mountains in North America. They have witnessed the coming and going of the tribes from the west and immigrants from the east. They have also provided nourishment for the body and spirit of those who have chosen to live and work in these hills and valleys. Like sculptor Stoney Lamar, whose home is in Saluda, North Carolina, a sleepy little village located near the Green River in the southern Appalachians just over the South Carolina state line. Stoney moved here with his family when he was 13. As the son of an Episcopal minister, Stoney grew up with a sense of service for his community and region, and began his professional career as a social worker. He soon found that his life was meant to take a different path, the path of a maker. His early work as a woodturner helped build a foundation for the work he is doing now. From his studio in Saluda, he has taken wood turning to a new level. It's here that he uses the tools of industry to create things of beauty. His sensitive hands respond to the rhythms of nature, music, and life as he creates visual melodies from wood and steel.
I don't look at a piece of wood and say, what's in that wood. I look at a piece of material, a log or a crotch piece of wood, and think about how does that relate to the history of my work and the work that I've made recently, and then what the potential is to move forward with that piece. I work sort of in a call and response kind of mode. So I'll start a piece and I'll make those initial cuts, and then I will set it aside for a couple of days and just think about how do I respond to that and what's the next move. So it's very intuitive. Most of the meaning of the work for me comes out as the work develops and the process influences the next step. I use the lathe as a carving tool, and so I'm using multiple axes to create the objects that I'm making. But one of the things that happens with the work on a lathe that is fascinating to me and part of my conceptual vocabulary for quite a long time is that I get to see a kinetic sculpture because it's not a consistent surface, because it's not just a round object. It takes on a whole different life on the lathe. And the marks on the pieces are just a reference point, so I can see where to cut to, because oftentimes I'm not dealing with a uniform surface. And one of the things that I want to try to do is to capture that kinetic energy and transform that to the static piece. I have a couple of advantages. The lathe behind me weighs 8,000 pounds, and it will turn 52 inches in diameter. When some of these pieces, when I'm working between centers and some of these pieces are off center, a normal lathe wouldn't tolerate that. It just wouldn't work. Well, the geometry is the sort of the basic set of ideas that I'm using. Cube, sphere, pyramid, square, circle, triangle. It's there. What I'm interested in is sort of stringing together these geometric forms that ultimately has meaning beyond the sheer geometric forms. Rhythm is very much a part of what I do, and it's become a part of what I make. As if a material, wood has a rhythm to it. Spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter. That the rhythm within the material really affects how I approach different species, as well as how I approach the work. Couple that with the fact that this process that I'm most associated with is rhythmical. You oftentimes hear people that are demonstrating wood turning talk about the dance, around the lathe. There is movement, there's kinetic energy that's involved that are things that only the wood turner experiences. When I decide that this particular piece of material will yield a figurative piece or an architectural piece or a landscape type piece, then I'll start, just kind of sketching, drawing actually on the piece. I don't do a lot of drawing prior to the development of the piece as far as sketching in a notepad. I do some sketching for ideas, but it's not specific to a piece. It's more or less just, sketching forms and that sort of thing. Well, the side grinders and the die grinders and the chainsaw and the other things that I carve with are a means to an end. I enjoy the process, but I'm not a real fine carver. I don't use a lot of chisels and that sort of thing. They're becoming more and more a part of my work because I'm working large enough to where the pieces that I'm making won't work on one of my lathes. So, and I didn't start out at this scale. I've started out doing this sort of thing on a fairly small scale, and then and as the work grew, my skills grew. Sort of in the process of transferring what I've learned from working on a lathe, using the lathe as a carving tool, to these forms that I'm making off the lathe using the chainsaw and the die grinders and the side grinders and that sort of thing. And it's pretty crude. It's loud and it's crude. but it gets me there. The steel came about as a result of I was using steel for bases for some of the pieces that needed a base. Wouldn't stand up on their own. I started to think in terms of the steel and its relationship to wood and what that relationship, what opportunities that relationship offered. There's a lot of characteristics between the two materials that sort of create some natural tension. And steel is cold, wood is warm. Steel is inorganic, wood is an organic material. Steel is smooth, wood is tactile. So I started to think in terms of the resolution between those elements, those particular elements with regards to the steel and the wood. The other thing the other opportunity that steel gave me was it gave me sort of a structure, not a skeletal structure, but a structure to build the work around and to hold the work in a particular position. And I liked it because I've been working in a subtractive process for 20 years. And I like the idea of being able to build stuff and not being tied to the geometry of a tree. So that was about 1996. I had some real initial success and encouragement for that. In terms of the surface, what I've found in terms of what the paint does for the work is that it forces people to see form first, and then they get involved with the material. So as I started to deal with these two major developments, the steel and then the paint, I started to feel whole. I started to feel like the work was complete, that the vocabulary, while still growing, it was growing around a complete form. And that was pretty exciting. The surfaces are not extremely sophisticated in terms of how they're developed. Their surfaces are sandblasted. And then the milk paint is laid down over that sandblasted surface. And then the process is to come back and sand back down through the milk paint until you get back down to the wood. The nature of the surface is such that oftentimes people ask me, before they've looked at it real closely, is this stone? And I just love that. Because it takes me out of the idea that I'm a woodworker and more into the realm that I'm a maker of sculptural objects. What I'm now trying to do is to bring that kind of rhythm that is natural on the lathe to the work that I'm doing off the lathe. That's fascinating. It's a way of coming to understand things from a material perspective that exclusive, to my experience. The individual geometric forms within the pieces are almost like an individual note of music. Heard as a singular note, they don't necessarily have much effect. But when those notes are strung together in a melodic way, then they create an emotion. I don't think that work has to be provocative, or I don't think there has to be gratuitous body parts for a work to be powerful. Just the idea that somebody's interested in making beautiful work is in and of itself a really powerful statement. The history of that is my mother was very sick all my life. She taught me the power of beauty and the restorative power of beautiful objects. And beauty to her was almost like a balm. That's a really important idea for me to maintain. Whereas I want people to respond honestly, what I love to hear is that's a beautiful object, or that's elegant. I love the word elegant, and those are two words that that I hear from time to time. Not very often, not often enough to get a big head about it, but I hear that from time to time. It's just like, that's wonderful. That sustains me.